we Bible students and pastors, we should know at least this table and this map. Otherwise, it is impossible to understand Christianity. It's impossible. It's a basic information that I just have written here. So try to memorize it. Otherwise, you cannot be a good pastor. Unfortunately, there are many, many pastors who do not know basic information. Here again, it's very simple here. You know all this data. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, when we call first century, first century means from the birth of Jesus all the way down to 100. First 100 years called first century. Okay, century means 100. Yeah, century means. And second century, from 100 to 200, the second century. So when I say second century theologian and second century church, then you have to think that the time frame. Got it? And third century, starting 200 to 300. See, now you got confused. When I say third century, some people say this area. It's not. Not 300 to 400. Okay? Third century means 200, from 200 to 300. The third century. And so on. So today is what? How many centuries? 21st centuries. Because now we have 2000 to 2100. So we just entered 21st centuries. Got it? I will ask you later. Now, let's go back to here. This morning, the subject, first subject would be the first century heresies. Write that down. Write that down. The first century heresies. Okay, are you ready for writing? In English, heresy means it's a Christian appearance, religion, the Christian appearance. It seems to be like Christian religion, but actually the inside of their teachings are not biblical. We call the pseudo-Christians. Pseudo means pseudo means it's a false Christian religion. Pseudo Christian religion. Pseudo, you don't have to know pseudo, but pseudo is kind of it looks very the same, but it's not. You see, a copy, kind of a copy religion from Christianity. It's hard to make distinctions. Okay? we will not call Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, religions, heresy or heretic religion, because they are clearly different from Christianity. Okay? It's a clear evidence that they are different from us. But Islam religion adopted their doctrines from Christianity. Therefore, we call it heresy. So any teachings that comes out of Bible yet different teachings, we call it heretic teachings. We call it heretic teachings. Is that clear with you? Okay. Now you can change your paragraph. Since St. Paul's teachings during the early part of and middle part of early and middle part of first century among many Jewish people who quoted Old Testament Bible teachings, associated with Jesus Christ teachings, mixed with the teachings of the Old Testament and Jesus and Paul's teachings. They created a heretic group. So Paul was very angry at their teachings. This teaching group called Ebionites, so it's called Ebionism. These people, we call them Ebionites. Ebionism. Would you say after me? Ebionism. Yeah. This is during the early and middle part of the first century. Jewish people's teachings on Jesus. On Jesus. Their teaching is this. They denied the deity of Jesus. You know deity? Deity of Jesus. What do you mean by deity? Eh? Huh? What is a deity? Deity means, would you pronounce it? It's D-E-T. Deity means is God. Okay? they denial of the deity of Jesus. That's the English expression. The denial of deity of Jesus. That's a whole English sentence. Okay? Denial means what? Rejection. Okay? Rejection of the godness of Jesus Christ. Paul's teaching at the time was focused on what? Paul's teaching was focused on the deity of 100% deity of Jesus Christ. And also 100% humanity of Jesus Christ. But the so-called Christian groups, a Jewish Christian group, see now that's the confusion here. See, Jewish Christian group came up with fighting against the Paul's teachings that Jesus is not God. Especially amongst the Galatian Jewish Christian groups. You look at here, map. Galatia, this is Turkey, okay? Here, around here called Galatia. Okay, Galatia in Turkey. And you look at me here. Over here it was Asia, right? Yesterday we studied Asia. We had 7 churches here. Now it's a Galatia. Now, continue writing. Even before Jerusalem church members, scattered to these areas, there were many Jewish diasporas lived in those areas. Okay? Jewish diasporas. What do you mean by diasporas?
Leave their country and leave another.
Yeah. Diasporas means the Jews living in a foreign country. Jews living in a foreign country is called diaspora. It's plural, the many. Say diaspora. Okay? Diaspora. About diasporas, about before BC, around 500. So near the Babylonian captivities. It's actually 586. Starting 586 BC, Babylonian emperor here, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar took over Israel and Judah here, all these people got scattered around Babylonian Empire. At the time, Babylonian Empire was almost the Middle East and some part of that near the southern Europe, Babylonian Empire. Okay? So that is the beginning of Jewish diaspora. That is the beginning of Jewish diasporas. After 7 years of Babylonian captivity, only a few. You see, the number of total diasporas, more than 2 million people. But 70 years, Babylonian captivity was over. Because Babylonian captivity was for 70 years. But after the 70 years captivity, Jewish people are supposed to all go back to their homeland because captivity was over, right? But only 50,000 Jews went back to their homeland. Out of how many? 2 million. So all these remaining near 2 million people were scattered around the countries. We call them diasporas. Diasporas. Okay? So when Paul gets, Galatia, Asia, and all other parts of the, in Turkey areas, near 500 years, Jewish peoples, okay, for near 500 years, Jewish peoples had been living in these areas, diasporas. So when Jerusalem church was under the persecution, many Jewish Christians in the church got scattered around these areas as well, okay, joining the existing diasporas. Paul was preaching the gospel to those diasporas in Turkey area here, okay, during the second missions and third mission, even number 4 missions period. Especially the second mission time. Some Jews, okay, who were opposed to Paul's teaching. Because his message was what? Jesus is God. Yeah. Also, he is 100% human. And they say, no, he is not. So, they had a fighting over the issue on Jesus. See, now this time I'm teaching you Christology. So I teach you Christology through this historical aspect. Among those Jews, okay, who opposed strongly against the Paul's teaching on Jesus, called Ebionites. And they call themselves, we are Ebionists. And that doctrine called Ebionism. Ebionism. Even there are many Ebionism found today. Now, I'll tell you what their teachings are. Write it down. They reject virgin birth of Jesus. Jesus born to Joseph and Mary in a normal way. Jesus is an ordinary man with supernatural gift. Jesus is predestined. Jesus is predestined Messiah, but in human sense, not a God sense. Yes, as a human, people consider him as a Messiah, but he is not a God. One of the reasons for Paul wrote the letter to Galatians was to fight against those avionists, because these heretic teachings got into Galatian Christian community, destroying Christian community very severely. Even today, we can find some churches amongst the liberal churches denying the deity of Jesus Christ. So when you hear this, as you share the gospel and preach Jesus, you better tell people that this idea is not new. It's been there for last 2,000 years. Starting here. Okay? You call it Ebionism. Can you see the background information now? Yeah. Now, second heretic teachings is Docetism or Docetism. Docetism, C pronounced K, just like Macedonia. It actually is a Macedonia. In English, it calls it Macedonia, but actually it's a K sound. Macedonia. It's Docetism. Just write it down first. Docetism comes out of, in Greek word, dokeo. You studying Greek now. It's a dokeo. Instead of W out for easy for us, it's dokeo. It's a D-O-K-E-O, dokeo. In Greek word, dokeo means it seems to be. It seems to be. It appears to be. This meaning. Dokeo means. Dokeo. It seems to be. It appears to be. Now, also, during the post time, amongst Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, they believe Jesus is not human. It's totally opposite to Ebionism. Ebionism denies, they do not believe Jesus is God. Okay? But these people, they believe Jesus is God. Okay? But he is not human. He is 100% God. Jesus only appears to be God, appears to be human, but not actually human. It's totally opposite approach. He looks like a human, but he is not human. It looks like a very Christian way of approach, but it's not. He is 100% human as well. Okay? That's I'm going to teach you later more. Therefore, traditional orthodoxy Christian doctrine on Jesus is this: Jesus is total God and total human. Full deity of Jesus and full humanity of Jesus. Perfect deity of Jesus and perfect humanity of Jesus. Now, I have given you two typical heretic teachings on Jesus during the first century. Now, we have Ebionism, those who support Ebionism called Ebionites. And also Docetism, those who support, I didn't give you this, and Docetist. You just write it down there, Docetist. Now, next is the second and third century heresies. Write down as Christianity has entered in the second and third century, the persecution against Christianity became stronger and severe than ever before. And Christian churches had stood strongly and firmly against those persecutions. And also, these 5 major churches here had brought up many theologians and pastors and bishops and faithful lay people who are willing to die for the gospel. The catacomb church members were more faithful than ever before against Roman government persecution and even the persecutions from the Jewish diasporas. In the meantime, those catacomb Christians and church leaders had to fight internal enemies. They often felt very depressed by the enemy forces arising within the church community, called internal enemies. Those internal enemies we call the heresies. Teaching Trinity God differently from the true Bible teachings. The worst attack on the Trinity God was on Jesus Christ, His total deity and total humanity. Christology issue was the major spiritual fighting during those first, second, third, later fourth, fifth centuries. Even today, because of wrong Christology, many false teachings are prevailing all over the world. There are few distinctive heretic teachings during the 2nd and 3rd century. It's well known. First is Gnosticism, that's invented by Marcion, the man Gnosticism. You know, in gnosis, in gnosis in Greek word is knowledge, intellectual knowledge. It's the Gnosticism. Now, this is even now today it's very, very well known. Okay. Now here, this theory teaches total denial of humanity of Jesus Christ. Humanity of Jesus Christ. It is very much like Docetism. Write it down again, but a different form. Their teaching was much stronger than ever before. And this teaching had been spread around the whole Christian community in the world in those days, destroying church communities. Marcion here, who is the inventor of this doctrine, claimed that Jesus had never dwelt on this earth. Jesus was never dwelt on this earth in human form. He had dwelt on spirit form, not in human form. Okay? And second, heretic teachings in those days is Montanism by Montanus. Its Montanism is not related to the Christology. It relates to the Holy Spirit. This man, Montanus, attacked the Holy Spirit. He said this: the Holy Spirit did not come to the upper room. The Holy Spirit did not come to the upper room in Acts chapter 2, but the Holy Spirit just arrived here in the late 2nd century. Therefore, the late 2nd century, which is today, and then today, is the end time. So Jesus will come as the second coming of Jesus right now. That was the late 2nd century. So this is the end time. It was because they have been under the severe persecution. Only hope they had at the time was to have their Lord coming back again as soon as possible. So they developed this heretic doctrine. Change the paragraph. Of course, those 5 major church leaders did not like their teachings. Gnostic and Montanism teachings. But they could not stop it because their teachings have been spreading so fast and shaking churches and church leadership. And God changed the paragraph. God raised theologians and bishops to fight against their teachings. There are a few famous bishops and theologians who fought against their teachings. At the time, among these 5 churches, Alexandrian, Jerusalem, Antioch churches were called Eastern churches. Eastern, because they locate east. Okay? Eastern churches. And here, Romans and Constantinople churches called the Western churches. They divided into two groups. Even those 7 churches in Asia, or the Western churches. The Western churches and Eastern churches. You have to know that. When you read church history, they divide it that way. In the Western churches, there are some leaders who fought against heretic teachings, okay? So I'll give you Western church leaders who fought against. First one is Irenaeus. Irenaeus. It's a very famous man. Say after me. Irenaeus. Naos or Naos. So he lived in AD 130 to 202. So the 130 is where? It's the 2nd century, isn't it? 202 is 3rd century, right? Right? Yeah. So he lived in the middle and later part of 2nd century. This man, continue writing. This man, he came from Smyrna. Now you're familiar with Smyrna. Where is Smyrna? In Asia here, right? Yeah, he was a bishop of, at the time no bishop, but he just called bishop. Bishop is a pastor. He was a pastor of Smyrna church. Yeah, remember Smyrna church? Smyrna church was under persecution, right? Yeah. He was a pastor of Smyrna church. He was so famous man, very famous man, and later he moved from Smyrna someplace here, all the way to France. Later, he was a missionary to France, and now, it's a Lyon. It's one of the major cities in France. Lyon, not Lyon. Okay. Lyon. He went to Lyon, France, became a bishop of Lyon. He became a Lyon bishop. So he was actually today termed missionary to France. Who wants to be like Irenaeus? This man fought against the heretic teachings. There is another famous man called Tertullian. T-E-R, Tertullian. Say after me. It's AD 162 to 220. He was born in Africa. That's today's Libya. This is Egypt here. This is Libya. Today's Libya, in the Bible we call, the Simon who carried the cross. What is the name? Simon from where? Huh? Cyrene. Yeah, Cyrene. Cyrene. It's the same name. And called Kurene. Kurene. Y, Cyrene, Y, spells in Y, but it pronounces U. Kurene. The Carthage, that's the town name. Okay, now today it's not famous, but at that time it was famous. There is a northern part of here, near Cyrene, called Carthage. Later, who is the name of who is the founder of Roman Catholic theology? Augustine. Have you heard the name? Augustine. Augustine also came from this region. So all these people are Africans, Northern Africans. This man, Tertullian, say after me, Tertullian? Not Tertullian, it's Tertullian. Yeah. This man also was a big fighter against this. Later, this man got promoted to Rome. He was a bishop. You see, such a countryman at the time went all the way to Rome. Rome was kind of today's Washington, D.C. You know? See, such a countryman got promoted to the world center. At the time, they did not have any airplane. How could he go? By boat. So Tertullian. Now, in the Eastern Church, and now one more, there's another famous man called Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr, his name is actually Justin. But this man was beheaded. You know, beheaded? Cutting hair, cutting head. Head cutting called in English beheaded. Beheaded. Okay? Beheaded. Because of the fighting against these guys, Justin got beheaded by fellow dirty Christians. They are not Christians anyway. Okay? So, church historians call him martyr. You know what do you mean by martyr? He died for the gospel. Okay? So his name becomes officially Justin Martyr. It's that Martyr becomes his last name, family name. So we call him Justin Martyr. So now we have three famous guys' names here. First one is what? Irenaeus. Irenaeus. Say after me. You have to memorize it. Irenaeus. Next, Irenaeus. And Tertullian. Tertullian. And Justin Martyr. All these famous guys fought against heresies such as what? Gnosticism, and Montanism. And now Eastern Church. I am teaching you very slowly, okay, all these church histories relating to Christology. Because Christology is so important. I started with the birth of Jesus over there, all the way now coming up to now 2nd century. Are you following me? Eastern church leaders. Eastern church means where? Alexandrian, Jerusalem, even Antioch church. Write it down. Among these churches, among these Eastern churches, Alexandrian church was the most powerful and famous. Antioch church in the beginning was the missionary sending church led by St. Paul and Barnabas. But after St. Paul and Barnabas, so-called theologians were produced by the Alexandrian church, today's Egyptian church. There are two famous Bible teachers and scholars in the Alexandrian church who have influenced whole Christian community with their teachings. Number one is Clement. And Origen. Here, Clement, and we do not know when he was born, but he died in 96 AD. And Clement's disciple is Origen, his disciple is Origen. These two men were brilliant scholars. Now, change the paragraph. In order to prevent and fight against these heretic teachings, Clement and Origen, with the help of these Irenaeus and Tertullian, all these guys, they developed the first time in church history a common creed. Because at the time, all these churches and Christians had never been united in one force. They all separated each other and just worshiping God the way independently. No joint force among them. Because of these heretic teachings attacking churches, these leaders got together discussing for the necessity of united creed. Creed means the kind of creed means it's kind of doctrine, but it's a little bit. Creed means in Latin word, it's credo. In English, it means I believe. I believe. They say, we have to develop one sentence, whatever, any form that commonly sharing our belief that we believe this. So they developed this, and so as a result, that they developed that famous Apostles' Creed. You know, we recite this, the Apostles' Creed, remember? We believe so like that. Okay? That Apostles' Creed that we are now reciting on Sunday, okay, on occasion of our gathering, was developed by these people. Okay? This Apostles' Creed was created. Why? For what purpose? To have our common belief, to fight against heretic teachings. So even Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans, Baptists, all the denominations still reciting the Apostles' Creed. And one more, just a quick, one more. And they decided, wow, we need a leader who can carry the flag, to fight against those guys. Okay? So they said, okay, let us develop. First is Apostles' Creed, and let us develop Episcopal. Episcopal system. Episcopal system means it's kind of a bishop system or overseers. That means let us appoint someone who is in charge of authority. Okay? We needed some leader who can handle all these issues on behalf of us. Before this time, church was kind of a loose, tight community. Not a systematic, hierarchical community. You know what I mean? No official top leader. It's a loosely tight. But to fight against those enemies, we got together tightly and systemized and appoint the high bishop. So this man can carry the flag. So this is the beginning of church hierarchical system. We call it episcopal system. Episcopal means bishop, high, like in triangle. There's the one guy in the top here that we call episcopal. It's archbishop. This is officially the church now became a class society, hierarchical society, that we call it episcopal system. So Roman Catholic Church, very strongly episcopal. And Anglican Church is very strong in episcopal system. So we call we call Church of England, which is the Anglican Church, Episcopal Church. Have you heard that?
Yes,
yeah. That means top leader has the power. Now, let me stop right here. Okay, let's take a break. But before we take a break, you talk each other again.